I'm not sure you're a college football fan, except, of course, for the Buckeyes and the Ohio State University, OH. But there's an incredible Jewish story being told in college football right now. You may not be studying the rankings and the projections for the college football playoff, but if you haven't, I'm available during Kiddush to talk about them. But I want to argue that the biggest story is the surprising rise of the sixth-ranked now school in America and its starting quarterback. Unranked just a few weeks ago, BYU, the football powerhouse Brigham Young University, known for its religious education, not its safety blitzes, is a top contender. And the reason that this Mormon institution is leading college football is because of their open, proud Jewish starting quarterback, Jake Retzlaff. On a campus of more than 35,000 students, largely Mormon, Jake is one of three students, three. There isn't even a million of Jews there. Now undefeated 9-0 and nationally ranked, led by Jake, their Jewish starting quarterback, who is known by his own personal nickname and moniker, BY Jew. It's true. He proudly embraces his Jewish faith and has Jewish fans cheering him across the country, across the world, and most especially from Israel. He's rapt to fill in at the stadium before practices. Jake shares that he is welcomed with open arms by his teammates, many of whom had never met a Jew before. And after October 7th, Jake received immediate support from his BYU coaching staff and friends. Known for proudly wearing a large Star of David at practices, game day, and during interviews, BYU Jake grew up in California, active in his synagogue, with a sports-themed bar mitzvah where everyone wore their favorite jersey to the party. His was quarterback Aaron Rodgers. In an interview recently, Jake shared, "I see myself not as a quarterback, but more importantly, as a proud Jew. I feel like I'm here for a reason on the national stage. Maybe there'll be one Jewish kid who will watch the game, who will be inspired to be better and to reach higher like I did." This week's Torah portion, Vayera, is one of the most important and defining readings for the Jewish people, with foundational stories that shape what it means to be a Jew. Our world today is definitely divided. Our world, you could say, is on fire. Our world is at war, on the brink of collapse, with fear and desperation, with uncertainty, filled with what seems to be intolerance, immorality, and evil. A beautiful and inspiring story of Jewish pride on the football field, of acceptance, of overcoming the odds, isn't the only answer to conquer a world that is filled with Jew hatred, in a country that seems unsteady, and with Israel at war. In the middle of this week's Torah portion, a portion that begins with angels visiting Abraham and Sarah and ends with the dramatic scene of a father binding his son to the altar, we encounter Abraham, who argues with God. Abraham, who protests the destruction of the cities of Stone and Gomorrah, defined as evil and immoral without a specific description of their egregious offenses. We are not unaccustomed to protests in this time. In fact, protest seems to be the thing that everybody is a part of. Counter-protesting, protesting, you name it. Whether it's on campus, protests against the Israeli government on Saturday nights in the streets of Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, protests joining hostage families, protests at county council meetings, protests across the globe. This moment in our Torah reading today is the first instance of protest in the Bible, the first time a human being stands up to argue with God. Some even suggest that at this moment, Abraham becomes God's teacher. When the Torah says that God says, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? For I have singled him out so that he may teach his children to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and good, tzedakah u'mishpat, that which is righteous and just. That is, in fact, Abraham, who teaches God the lesson, alarmed at the prospect that God would act unjustly. Abraham speaks up and protests. Will God sweep away the innocent with the guilty? A God who has so much respect for humanity, so much confidence in the morality that has been instilled into our world, a God who is now a partner with humanity. Will God listen? Rabbi Shai-Held suggests that, in fact, this is how God is not taught by Abraham, but how God teaches Abraham. For God is the ultimate teacher. God gives the space for Abraham to learn to speak up, to stand up in the face of injustice, to take responsibility, personal, moral, and collective responsibility. The unnamed brutal cruelty of the inhabitants of Sodom, to which God rises to put an end to, is a challenge to Abraham to speak up for the innocent, to do what is right and good, even after God presents the plan to destroy the city. It is that moment that the Torah says, Vayigash Avraham. Abraham steps forward. Abraham approaches God. Abraham speaks out. And that this was a test for Abraham that we must emulate as well, a model for us to follow, to stand up and to speak out when we see injustice in this world. The rabbis even suggest that prayer itself could be protest, not simply words of praising God, words of thanking God, or asking God for a little favor, perhaps recovery from health, clarity on a question, strength, perseverance. But the words that we pray can also protest God, be angry at God, protest the state of this world that we live in. The illicit evil of Sodom is described by the rabbis with many examples of cruelty, exploiting strangers, punishing any type of good, any kindness, any act of charity, any act supporting another person, brutality, sexual violence, refusing to welcome an outsider, guest, or anyone different. It said in Sodom, no difference would be tolerated. In fact, they weren't just excluded, anyone different would be eliminated. Here is just one rabbinic midrash, one rabbinic legend that describes these unnamed qualities of cruelty of Sodom. In Sodom, in the city, there were beds where people slept on, just like we have. But there, the beds were exactly the same size. And you would lay out on the bed, and if your body didn't fit the bed, if you were longer than the bed, they would cut you so you would fit on the bed. If you were smaller than the entire bed, they would stretch you. I mean, is this what you would do to a normal person? There was forced uniformity. The people of Sodom only would live with people who were exactly like them in every single way. So why would Abraham stand up and protest God's plan to destroy such an evil people? A city without morals that literally eliminates those who are different. Marilyn Robinson, in her book Reading Genesis, suggests that when Abraham asked God, will you sweep away the innocent with the guilty, the innocent with the righteous? That is the wrong question. It should be this: should the few innocent shield, sustain, protect, and shelter a population that is guilty and cruel? If there are indeed 50, 45, 40, 30, 20, or 10, the negotiated number that Abraham and God come to, innocent people, can 10 people change the identity of a city? Isn't the tendency of a population to do evil still exist there? How could 10 be significant? And as we think about the world today, these are questions that we have to ask ourselves about innocent and guilty. Are there any innocent in the cities among the people who we consider our enemies, whom we are fighting, in the divided camps, potentially even political camps across the chasm from us? Are there any good? Are there innocent? Does this change how we approach the conversations about our future, about Israel's future? In the biblical negotiation, God accepts Abraham's answer of 10 good people, a minion's worth of good and innocent. Because perhaps even a modest amount of goodness can be decisive. Individual lives and choices are crucial to the future. As Rabbi David Wolpe writes, a small group could have saved a city, and maybe even in our day could save our world. Since we don't know how many good people there are in this world, we have to add ourselves to that count, to be good, to be innocent, to be kind, not to be cruel like Sodom. So if I can return to quarterback Jake Retzlaff's school, BYU, Brigham Young University, it was in 1985 that Elie Wiesel addressed BYU about this week's portion and a voice for all of us. As a voice for humanity, Elie Wiesel gave a talk entitled, A Last Breath of Witness. I'd like to share a few quotes from it. If Jews somewhere are suffering, it is my duty to help them, Elie Wiesel said. But that's never exclusive. It is the Jew in me who must openly help everyone else in this world. After the war, I was convinced that out of so much suffering, something good must happen. I felt that beyond the despair, there must be hope. The hope was that never again would certain things be possible. That because of what happened to us, all other people would be saved from totalitarianism, from cruelty, from hunger, from humiliation. I would never have believed that in my lifetime there would again be religious war, economic war, and ethnic war. Is it that we have not done our work? Is it that our testimony was not received? This is my despair. If this message that we give now with our last breath, for soon the last survivor will be gone, will not move the world to humanity, what will? Therefore, I, Elie Wiesel, am here. In spite of my anguish, we must continue. Oh yes, we are moved by despair, but we are never moved to despair. When I was young, I was convinced that if I were to fast enough days, if I were to lead a good life, if I were to say the proper prayers, that I could bring the Messiah. Now I am no longer sure. So what is my hope today? One day, a just man, young, vibrant, dynamic, decided that he must save the city of Sodom, the epitome of sin and deceit. So he began going from street to street in Sodom, from marketplace to marketplace, saying, men and women, do not steal. Men and women, do not lie and do not sin. In the beginning, people actually stopped to listen to him. They thought he was amusing. After all, how many just people come to Sodom? But after a while, he repeated himself so much that everyone stopped listening to him. After many years, he was so old that he could barely talk and barely walk. Yet he still walked and talked every morning, going from street to street, from marketplace to marketplace, saying, people, you are destroying yourselves. Repent, remember God. But no one listened. Then finally, one small child stopped the man and said, stranger, teacher, why do you do this? Don't you see that it's useless? Yes, said the old man. Then why do you continue? And the old man responded with these words. And this is what Elie Wiesel said at BYU almost 40 years ago. I will tell you why, my son. In the beginning, when I came here, I was convinced that I could manage to change these people. But now I know I will never change them. But if I continue, and I shout louder and louder, and I scream louder and louder, more and more, it's because I don't want them to change me, to change who I am. Shabbat Shalom.